Hi, this is Kathleen Alfano. I'm one of the co-PIs for Create, and we welcome you to our webinar today. The webinar's title is From Wind to Watts, Investigating Energy Storage and System Efficiency. Our speaker will be Tom Buchanan, and you can look at all our webinars on createenergy.org, and we have many resources available there. Next. Here we go. One of the things that we'd like your help with is we do a 5-year survey to find out, what your interests are, that we make sure that our grant is tailored to. We're funded for 5 years, and we're up for another extension through 2032. So it's especially important that we get your input. We've developed 2 brief surveys to gather input from energy professionals and educators. The feedback we receive will directly inform how our academic programs evolve. And so it's very important that we have these filled out. We have live links that we'll put in the chat. Gabby's going to either put it in now or when the slides aren't up. So please check the chat and please give us your input. Next. As I mentioned, we have other upcoming events. So we have 4 more innovation webinars and 1 regular Create webinar coming up that we would really appreciate you looking at and attending. There's always great information. Next, we also have upcoming events, not just webinars, but we have workshops, including a virtual solar workshop that has these dates, April 11th, April 25th, and May 9th, with an optional discussion session on the April 22nd and May 6th. And then we have in-person workshops that are across the country. And so we have a lot of people already applying, but there's still time. And most of them have stipends that can help you with your travel. So please go up to the registration. It's open on the Create website under the Events tab. So that brings us to our speaker, and that is Tom Buchanan. Tom has been teaching high school physics, chemistry, and physical science at Colby High School for 31 years. He loves getting new ideas from people and using them to develop science labs that keep capturing a student's attention while giving just enough information to keep them motivated as they work their way from a question to a defendable claim. So with that, we're going to turn it over to Tom.
All right, welcome to the webinar. If you have any questions while I'm doing this, just put in the comments and I'll address it as soon as it comes up. So I want to show you a lab that I developed. Kind of got this idea from taking one of the workshops you mentioned, the solar plus storage, but I adapted it quite a bit based on the materials that I have. So I use these KidWind turbines for this because I have a classroom set and it's a good use of them for a different lab. So after we do the wind one, of course, we get a discussion on the problem with solar and wind, that you don't have it all the time. You only have it, when it's windy and sunny. So what do you do in the meantime? Well, you find ways of storing it when you have a lot of it. And so 3 different ways I'm going to show you how I do this in this lab. So the first one, I give them back their wind turbines. We take off the blades because I don't have a fan for everyone to use. So you could have them just spin the thing. I put a stick in here, and you could have them spin it by hand. You could do it that way. Or what I found works even better than that is to use the spools that come with the kit, or you can just buy these from Amazon, and to wind a string on there. And that way, when you pull the string, it spins the turbine. So the first method of storage show you is using what's called pump storage. So the idea is you have a lower reservoir and an upper reservoir. And so instead of using a river to make hydropower, you pump the water up the hill when you have a lot of it, and then you let it come back down in the nighttime so when you don't have solar. So my little setup is just a cheap little water pump from Amazon. And so that's my lower reservoir. I'm going to pump that up to this higher one, which is just a petri dish on top of another beaker. So we hook that up to the wind turbine. So I used to use alligator clips, but I changed to these little connectors. You can get these on Amazon. They're called Arduino wires or Arduino connectors. It just got rid of a lot of problems with using alligator clips where the clips are touching together and they're shorting things out. So it makes it pretty easy to connect things without those issues. And then you'll see I did have to wire this special to leave 2 open bare wires here because I will need that for the meter. So if I now crank the wind turbine, you can see that it does pump the water. So the point of this though is we're going to measure the energy that we put into pumping it and compare that to the energy that we get out. And from that, we can calculate the efficiency. So to measure the energy that I put in, which would be electrical energy, I need to measure 3 things. I need to measure the energy with one of these things if you have them. So if you have one of these energy sensors from Vernier, that'll measure the voltage and the amperage and the time, and then you can put it all together. You get a nice little graph showing the power over the time. You can see the spikes when I'm pulling on the thing. And then you do the integral of that, and there you go. There's the energy, and in this case, millijoules. But I don't have a classroom set of these, so I got to do it the cheaper way, which is to use individual cheap multimeters. So I'll show you how I do it that way. So if I hook up the voltmeter to the ends that I left exposed, this of course will measure the volts. And then for the amp meter, I'm going to use one of these clamp meters. That's because I happen to have a classroom set. You could use these here. You would just have to put it on amps. So if I clamp that thing, these clamps just go right over the wire. So it makes it a lot easier. You don't have to unconnect things and then try to put the clamp meter in series. So I just clamp that on there. And then, of course, they have to measure the time, too. Now, I have them do these in different stages because it's a lot to ask for them to watch the amp meter and the voltmeter and record the time while they're doing this. But I'll just do it all in one shot. So as I pump the water, of course, they're looking at the voltmeter. So they're trying to, approximate the average voltage. And they're also looking at the amp meter. And the same thing, approximating the average amperage. And then they're also timing it, or, they do more than one run. And so now that they have the voltage and the amperage and the time, they can multiply all 3. And that gives them their energy, electrical energy they put in joules. So then to get the gravitational energy, they have to take the water that they pumped and find gravitational energy. We need to know the weight of the water. So they just pour that in a graduated cylinder so they can easily measure the volume. And then 1 milliliter water is 1 gram. So from that, they know the grams. They can change that into kilograms. So then they'll have the kilograms of water that they pumped to the upper lake. Then they also need to know the height that they pumped it. So that would be the height change from down at the lower reservoir to the upper reservoir. And that'll have to be in meters if they want to end up in joules. And then multiply those 2 times the acceleration of gravity, 9.8, and that'll give you the gravitational energy in joules of the water that was pumped up there. So now what do we know? We know the electrical energy that we put in joules, and we know the gravitational energy that we got out. So I can divide the 2, and that'll tell me, and multiply by 100, and that'll tell me the percent efficiency. So with this setup, when they do that, they get efficiencies that are really low, like a couple percent. And this is only halfway. So at nighttime, the water's got to come back down, spin the pump, make electricity. So then we'd also have losses there. But that's just because we're using these cheap little pumps here. But I don't want them to think that this idea is useless because it's so inefficient. So I have them look up at this point what the large scale operations get, and they get like 80 to 85% efficiency for the round trip. Okay, so that's the first method. All right, now the second one, in case you don't have a higher place to pump water to, then instead of using pump storage, you just raise any old weight up. So for this one, I use another one of these towers. Well, I don't have 2 classroom sets, so for this one, I just have a single one of these that they come around and take turns. And I also do this one a lot different. Rather than being very precise about calculating the energy that I put in, the energy I get out, I do it in a way that's more intuitive and a lot quicker to test. You have to make sure you tell them which way to wind this thing. I'm winding it counterclockwise. That'll be very important later on pump, I think, doesn't actually matter, but the battery later on will. So now you can see I have a new situation. So again, I got my wind turbine going during the day, I got to making tons of energy, and I want to now lift weights up, then let them come back down at night. So like I said, rather than taking a bunch of measurements, we're simply going to pull this one. As they wound it, they would have counted how many times they pulled it. So now when I pull it, you can see that the other one lifts it up and gets it about that high, right? So I'm standing there to hold the thing, so that's how high they got it from that many turns, right? And then I'm going to let it go, or it's going to bring the energy back, and it's going to wind the string back up. Now, it doesn't get anywhere near what I put into it, because definitely energy loss. And since it doesn't wind up nice and tight, they also have to actually go back and count how many turns it makes, so then they can find the efficiency.
So Tom, this is Gabby here, and I only am interrupting you because you told me to. One of the questions is do you give them a set time for spinning their turbine? So I'm thinking this kind of goes to what you're talking about.
Oh, you mean for the pump storage?
I believe that's what the question is asking.
Well, I use a piece of string that is long enough to put quite a bit of water in the lake without overfilling it. So basically the time is whatever time it takes them to pull the string to pump the water.
Okay, and if that didn't answer the question, you guys can put it back in the chat and I will ask again.
Yeah, because the time is the time that we're putting in the electrical energy. To calculate the electrical energy, we need to know the amperage of voltage and how long I put it in. So it's basically whatever time it took them to pull the thing and pump the water.
Okay, and it says that answered the question. And then you have one other, but I'll ask it at the end. And so Mike, I'm not ignoring you.
Okay. So this one is now a round trip because we put it in and we got it back out. So to calculate the efficiency, they'll take the number of turns that they got out, divided by the number of turns that they put in, times 100, and there's their percent efficiency. So this one will also be pretty low because, again, not really precise equipment. And so I have them also look this up and see what the large scale operations do that lift weights. And that is also around 80% as well.
Yeah.
All right, that brings me to the third way. So this one is using battery storage. So this one's a little tricky because you can't just pick any old batteries. We need batteries that we can recharge. We also need batteries that aren't too powerful because then it's so hard to drain them. So you can see when I plug this in, you can see how it starts to spin. So it's important that the batteries are not dead, because if they're completely dead, then when I put the energy in, it's going to take a lot of the energy just to get the batteries to a high enough voltage where it can start to spin the turbine. So what I have them do is I have them connect it, and then it'll, hopefully they're a little bit charged. So I have them wait until it stops spinning, because then they're draining off the energy. And then the other possibility is that the battery is too dead and it doesn't even spin it. In that case, I tell them to do it until it starts to spin and then to start over. So as you can see, now it stopped spinning. So now what I'll do is I will crank the thing, give it same amount of energy again, moving all the string. And again, we're going to watch it. We're going to let it wind back up. So we're not going to have it wind up tight because then we would be putting resistance on there and that would be stealing some of the energy away. We're just letting it loosely wind up there. This one you can see it's winding quite a ways. And now it's possible that it would wind the entire thing and then keep turning. So you do have to make sure that if it does keep turning, that they count how many times it spins after the string is already wound up. And that's because the string is really loose on there. So as you can see, it went past that length, but that's because the string is really loose. So I'm getting nowhere near the number of revolutions that I put into it. So eventually when it does stop and they're done counting the extra, then they'll have to go back and they'll have to manually count each one that's on there because again, it's on there loose. And they will get less than they put in, but it'll be a lot better than the other two methods. Battery, just a lot less moving parts here. So the battery is definitely more efficient. And again, they check the professionals, and same thing, the professionals, they get like in around 90% round trip efficiency for storage by batteries.
So Tom, you have a question on what chemistry is the battery?
Oh, yes, NiCads. I get those because they're super cheap. They're used like in the just the solar lights that you have outside, and they're fine to drain dead. Like lithium batteries, you can't let them drain dead. And I don't need strong ones, so they're high enough voltage where I have to do a 2-pack though to get this thing to turn. So a single one isn't a high enough voltage. So a 2-pack works perfect for NiCads as long as you again make sure they're not completely dead. You have to charge them up a little bit, and then also make sure they're not fully charged. So when you buy them, you're going to have to drain them down before you use them. Otherwise, it's going to spin for many, many minutes.
You got a very cool, they love how simple this is.
Yeah.
And you also have a question or a request on if you have lesson plans that you've put together that you'd be willing to share.
Yes, I do have the lab that I use. No, I could. Oh, you want me to share that?
If you'd be willing.
How do you want me to do that?
You could send it to me and I would be happy to share it with the
Okay.
participants. That would probably be the easiest. But you and I can connect on that.
Yep, I can do that.
Great. So, and like I said, I hate to interrupt you, but you'd said you wanted to be interrupted if there were questions that pertain to what you were talking about. So I'll let you to get back.
Well, those are the three. That's the three that I have. So.
Okay, then I will, if you're ready, I will open it up if people want to open up their mics and ask you questions. Then
Sure.
I kind of started covering the things that were in the chat. You got a lot of very cool, they love it, and thanks for sharing. But if people would actually like to ask questions themselves, please feel free to open up your mics and ask questions yourselves.
I could also just mention that this is what I do in freshman science. So that's why it's kind of lower level. But then in physics, the senior level, then we take it to the next step where we set up an entire renewable energy grid where we have all different kinds of inputs and we have all different kinds of methods of storage. And we work together as a class to get this huge grid thing functioning as one with all the inputs and the outputs, trying to keep the voltage steady. So this is just their intro in physical science to how we can use renewable energy on a grid without having all those downtimes.
They would love to see that, especially the power grid.
Yeah, that one is incredibly complicated. I could share that one, but that one's quite the setup. I mean, it takes up like half of my room, and then we have all the different. There's like 7 different groups. Like you have people with wind turbines and hydropower. You have electric cars. I mean, I could put that thing in there. And you can try to make sense of it. That thing I've been doing for probably 20 years, and I'm still making major changes to that. This one I just started a couple of years ago, and this one I've got to a point where it works pretty good.
Tom,
They say it's best.
Tom, this is Mike. I'm the guy that invented that turbine that you have. And
Yeah,
I have to say, I love how simple the storage stuff is. And I'd love to talk with you at some point later and share it with the world because I think it's pretty awesome. I've been trying to find a good storage thing and it's amazing. And I'd love to see the big messy power grid thing because I could do something similar, but mine is super big and messy too.
yeah, it does it gets very complicated, especially near the end. We then automate it using our Arduinos and computer programming.
Very cool.
So then it gets insanely complicated.
Yeah, I'd love. Tom, where do you live? Which state do you live in?
Wisconsin.
Oh, well, you're nearby. I have to come meet you. So we'll have to make up a time and meet up and I'll come visit you.
Yeah, let me know. I'd be happy to have you stop by.
That would be awesome.
I even took that hydro webinar with you and I made some changes to that and found an interesting way to do that too.
Well,
Sure.
I'll have to come and find you, Tom, and we'll hang out for an afternoon. You can show me all your tricks. You sound like you got like things going on.
Sounds good.
All right, so I think we've covered most of the questions we had in the chat. Is there anybody else who has some questions that they would like for Tom? All right. well, that was pretty cool, Tom. You covered an enormous amount of cool stuff in a really short amount of time. And that's kind of the purpose of these innovation series is to really kind of touch on the cool things that you're doing in your classroom, and to kind of get them out there for people to see. And you did exactly that. So I wanted to thank you for that and tell you how impressed we are with what you've done. Um, with that, I will tell everybody thank you for joining us and that we hope to see you guys on our next innovation webinar. And we will see you guys later.
All right, sounds good.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Really do appreciate it. It was super cool, and the work you're doing is awesome.
All right,
Yes, thank you, Tom. Great to
Thank
see
you, Tom.
contributions coming from Wisconsin.
no problem.
I do have a question for you, actually.
Yeah.
So for your giant messy grid that you're working with, I do something similar as well. But I was just kind of curious, what are the things that make it messy? Maybe we can brainstorm some things if you want to play with them.
Well, so the way I set it up is they have to keep the grid stable. So stable to me means they have to keep it within a certain voltage range. And so I have an alarm set up on the grid that if it goes too high or too low, the alarm goes off. And then the other challenge is that I have a source of electricity from an outlet that I put into there, and that stands for coal. Since Wisconsin, we have a lot of coal power. And so the other objective is to keep the coal power to a minimum to reduce pollution. But of course, coal is, steady, as soon as you need power. And so it's like the backbone of the grid. So you have the person that's running the coal that's, keeping track of the watching the grid voltage and trying to put in power to keep it stable, but trying not to be putting in when they don't have to be putting in. And then you have the wind turbines that, come on, when the wind starts to pick up, and then we put a second one in like midday when we have even more wind, and then towards night starts to die down. And then same thing with solar. When solar comes in, you get a ton of power coming in. And so that will spike the grid if you don't have someone coming in to lower it. And so the people that lower it, I have people that act as like industry that are like firing up their motors during the day. And then we have battery storage people that try to take energy from the grid when there's too much and store it to return later on. We have pump storage. So I have, people set up doing this, so pumping water also, but of course they don't want to pump water for storage if the grid doesn't have enough in there. So they're all like monitoring the grid voltage, trying not to trip the alarms. So it just gets incredibly hectic. And then we got an electric car. Someone's trying to drive their electric car. When they plug that thing in, the voltage just plummets because it really drains a lot. And so you got all these things working together, trying to keep the grid alarm from going off from too high voltage or too low voltage.
Wow, man, that is fantastic. I wish that more people heard that part, because I didn't realize that's what you're talking about. That's really, really cool.
Yeah.
So, Tom, that is amazing. I wonder. So, I'm Andy McMahon. I work with another. I'm a co-PI on Create, and I work with another national center. And one of the things we have with the other center is a team of people who can create desktop simulations. And I wonder, like, taking that messy grid lab, the idea of like basically making it digitized, right? So all of the moving levers and parts and components that you just described, but basically inputting that into a desktop simulation. Does that seem does that make you say, oh, that's cool? Or like, nah, that misses the point because I want it to be in, like, I want the tangible thing. I'm curious.
Well, it'd be nice if there was a relatively simple that wouldn't take a ton of time for them to introduce them to the idea, because that is a quick way for them to see how it all works like that. So in that case, yeah.
So I'm gonna get your contact information from Gabby. I would love to reach out. Like, I'm very serious about that. And so we have money to pay for a subject matter expert. So like if you're interested, we could I could set you up with my guys, and they just custom make everything. It's all free, it's all open source, anybody can use it. There's no paywall, there's no, nothing's for sale. It's just good ideas and sharing them. And so this is a great, to me, when I hear about it, this really plays into, like you just said, basically in a less hectic environment, show them how it works, and then get it all messy and hectic, right. And then I love it. That's awesome.
Yeah, because then you don't have to worry about electrical shorts and somebody not, being connected. So yeah, it would be nice to have a trouble-free way to get the idea across before they go into actually trying to build the thing.
I
So,
love that. Thank you so much. This was fantastic.
Yep, thanks.
Yeah, it's
Bye, everybody.
interesting when you said that when it was messy. I was expecting you to say like the connections and the wiring and stuff, but you're actually talking more about the physical management of the system, which is actually like that's kind of the fun messy that you want in a class.
Oh, yeah.
Like that's the like, holy crap, this is a lot harder than I thought it was. And that's kind of the message that we want to say, like, yeah, this is kind of hard.
Yeah, students really get into it, especially as they start to learn the intricacies. Like I said, the electric car really plummets it, so they'll watch the car and see when they're going to plug in because they know it's going to plummet. And so then the hydro tries to come in, quick, put a bunch of water through to get it back up before it drops.
Yeah. They could, and just imagine if they didn't know loads were coming on, how much harder it is, even with automated stuff,
Right.
So, way to go, man. That's awesome. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Tom. And I'm sure we'll stay in touch, but this was really awesome. They were three super cool examples.
All right.
Yeah, that was cool.
Great job. Thank